look up here as we go through this. Now, we've been looking at this book with this chart in mind. I'm going to have to redo this. Our live stream shows an inset down below on the bottom right side of the speaker, and so it's probably, if you're online, it's probably covering up some of this chart. So I need to figure out how to do that. I don't know yet. Anyway, we're now in this last section of the book. You have salvation through chapter 2, verse 10. You have submission through chapter 3, verse 12. And now this last section of the book is on suffering. So these are related topics. We have been saved from our sin by the submission of Christ to God, which involved his suffering on our behalf. And then he's saying to us in this book, since we've been saved by the blood of Christ, we must follow his pattern of submission to other people and to God, and then that will involve us suffering as a part of that whole process of salvation. So that's kind of the way the theme of the book works, and you can see that in these things. Now, we're on this section beginning in chapter 4, verse 1, the subsection that I call suffering cleanses us. One of the benefits of suffering is that it cleanses us. This is how we know its benefits. So let's read the text, verses 1 through 6, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about that. So this is what he says, 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. Therefore, based on what he said before, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind, for he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. There's the cleansing. That he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. They will give an account to him who's ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to the men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of this passage here. Well, I can't get it to stop there, in verse 1. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same mind, for he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Now, he's going to use this phrase, in the flesh, twice here in these two verses. So he's talking about Christ living in the flesh, and he says we shouldn't spend the rest of our time in the flesh doing these things. What do you mean by that? Well, I think this is what they would call a theologically significant statement. Most of us probably in this audience accept the fact that Christ came and lived in the flesh as a human being. We kind of accept that, but that's not true in a lot of circles that call themselves Christian. In fact, it wasn't true in the New Testament times either, because the Greeks began to teach that, some of the Greeks did, that they believed that the flesh was not God, that if it was God, it couldn't have anything to do with the flesh. So they separated the flesh from the God from the flesh. Big separation. And so to be godly, you had to be basically otherworldly eventually. Now, there's a lot behind this. It's essentially called Gnosticism, or some forms of it. But this is what Christ was, in fact, this is what Christ essentially in the first century called the Antichrist. Those who believed that Christ did not come in the flesh, he called the Antichrist, those people. And what they were saying is, if it's God, it can't be fleshly, and therefore, since you're saying Christ came and was a man, he can't be God. And so what they said in response was, well, Christ came, but he just looked like a man. It just appeared like a man, but he really wasn't a man. He really wasn't in the flesh. He didn't have a literal body. You will even have Christian teachers today who do not believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ. They'll say they believe in the resurrection, but if you press them, some of these higher ups and Episcopalians and Lutherans, they don't, these pastors, they don't believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ. Now, they don't believe it for a little bit different reason. They don't believe in it because they don't believe in miracles. They don't really believe that this could ever happen, that someone could die and be resurrected. They don't believe in that. So therefore, they don't believe that Christ was actually raised from the dead. They say people saw him, but it was an apparition. It was a vision. It was a spiritual resurrection. In order to be a Christian in the Bible sense, you must believe that Jesus Christ bodily rose from the dead, that his body that was on the earth was killed, put in the grave, and God raised it up, and he lived again. That's what you have to believe. Now, you know, I can't make you believe that. I'm just saying that's what's required to be a Bible Christian, that belief in that bodily resurrection. If you don't believe that, then you don't believe in Christianity. That's fundamental. And of course, that's your. You don't have to. I'm not going to make you do that, but you need to own up. People need to own up to what they say. Have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. And if you don't believe that, then just say so. But so many these religious people higher up, they want to pretend that they want to fool common people in the pew who believe this, like that they believe the same thing, but they don't believe the same thing. So be careful of them. But he says Christ suffered in the flesh. He was an actual human being who had an actual body just like ours, and he lived and died just like we would live and die. He died from the same things that would kill us. Being crucified would kill us, was designed to kill, and so forth. And he proved he was dead. When they ran the sword up through his side, blood and water came out because it pierced his heart, and all the pericardium and all the water came out with the blood. This is what happens when you get stabbed like that. Especially if you're dead. It's what happens when you die. Water will come out too. So, he lived and died like a man. Now, you think Christ was just a man. Well, when did I say that? When did I say I thought Christ was just a man? Where does the word just come into any of that? But see, that's what people do. They rush in there. I say I don't believe that Christ was born at Christmas. Oh, you don't believe in Christ. They jump to another whole thing. Or I don't believe that Easter is a Christian holiday. Oh, you don't believe in the resurrection. I didn't say that at all. I said I don't believe in that the holiday Easter is in the Bible. Oh, you don't believe in the resurrection? This is what you get. Oh, you think Christ lived in the flesh? Well, you don't think he was God? I'm sorry. Isn't this not what happens? Isn't that what people do? Yes, it is what they do all the time. And it's unfair, but just be aware of what people are saying about this stuff. So Christ lived in the flesh as a man. He came, it says in Philippians 2, in the likeness of men, in the appearance as a man. And Hebrews chapter 2 says he shared in flesh and blood. We're going to see that in the sermon this morning. He shared in flesh. He had the same flesh and blood that we do. Isaiah predicted that he would be a man who there was nothing in him that we should desire him. He was not handsome, didn't have a special religious voice, which he talked in King James English, you know. We see this on TV. Didn't have a halo around his head. When people saw Jesus walking along, talking to him, he looked like an ordinary person. Don't you think God should have given him some special sign? He glowed or something? That's what the Catholic Church had done. They put halos around him. Don't you think God would have been better off doing that? We might think so, but God didn't think so. In fact, it doesn't even say he was taller than other men or stronger. We look at that. Almost every single U.S. presidential candidate who is taller than the other one wins the election. There might be some exception to that, but I don't think there is. Almost every single candidate who wins is taller than the other one, bigger. They even had Michael Dukakis stand on a stool, so it'd be sort of tall, you know. But that's how we are as human beings. What's it say about Saul, the first king of Israel? He's a big, handsome man who is head and shoulders above his countrymen. He was a big guy. So God said, well, I'll give him a king. They want a king, I'll give him the big one. And they all loved Saul because he was bigger and taller than the other guy. He wasn't Michael Dukakis, you know. It's not how that works. If I ran for president, I would have a hard time getting elected because I'm only 5'8", which is average height for a man of my age, but it's short compared to what people want for a leader. My brothers are 6 foot tall. They do fine. I got a grandson who's 6'5" or 6'6". He would do fine. That's why my son Phil gets leadership positions, because he's well over 6 foot tall, big guy. Everybody says, wow, he's a leader. Did God do that with Christ? Apparently not. And they're all handsome. Well, that runs in the family, of course. You knew that already. I didn't have to even tell you that, did I? Anyway, it's because of Judy. See, you thought it was because of me. It's because of Judy. But that's not how God did it. Just an ordinary person. What he was wanting them to do is listen to what he said and watch what he did, which is more accurately how we should assess people, isn't it? Listen to what they say, that's good, but listening to what they say is only half as good as watching what they do. Then you can determine whether you should follow somebody or not, or listen to them. Anyway, I got off on all that. He says Christ suffered in the flesh. Okay? They had to believe that. He lived in like a regular man. Now then, because Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same mind. For he who has also suffered in the flesh has ceased. What does that mean? Arm yourself with the same mind. Anybody got any thoughts on what that means? How does that fit in this context? Talk about suffering. What's the same mind here? What does it mean to arm yourself with the same mind? I heard somebody talking. Oh, there you are. Yeah.
You need to be ready to suffer.
You need to be ready to suffer. That's a good way to put that, Sharon. You need to understand that if you want to be like Christ, you're going to have to suffer, and you should be prepared for that. You should be armed to do that with that same mind of a willingness to suffer. Understanding that you're going to suffer and that it's okay to suffer is a weapon that you can use. It's a shield, really. Because Christians can lose their faith when they get presented this weak, phony gospel that if you become a Christian, you're going to get rich and everything's going to go well for you and get all your prayers answered. That weak, phony gospel that's out there being preached. And then when they become a Christian and things don't go well, they lose their faith. They get lost. They're lost. Yes, sir.
How can you go into battle with Satan if you're unarmed, if you have no armor? No. I mean, it's hard to go into some place like with Matthew Leisure and the police. You're not going to go to a shooting with no gun.
You better be prepared to suffer. You know, when I was a kid, time I was very young, I had to have all these medical procedures done on me because of my handicap and other illnesses. Maybe it was just me, but I would get extremely upset when they would just do stuff to me. Come in and try to hide they were going to give me a shot or going to cut me or something. I'd get very upset about that. Through such a fit when I was about 11 years old that the doctor finally told everybody in the hospital, you can do whatever you want to Mike. You just got to tell him what you're going to do. You got to talk to him about it. Tell him what you're going to do. Why was I like that? Well, because I'm stubborn and arrogant. I know that. But even when I was 11. But the point is, if they would say, we're going to give you a big nasty shot again, every 4 hours I'm getting a big nasty shot of penicillin and cortisone and stuff like that. I could say, okay, do it. And I could prepare myself. I could say, okay, I'm fine. It's going to hurt. Nothing to be done about it. And I would be okay with hurting. When they just walked up and stabbed me, act like they were going to do anything, talk to me and stab me, well, then I didn't like that at all. I'm not ready for that. So I don't mind. I didn't mind if I was going to hurt. I'll tell them today, I'm going to have this stuff done. Okay, well, I know it's going to hurt. It's okay. Suffering is part of being alive, and you just have to grit your teeth. In fact, the shots they give you to stop you from hurting Sometimes they hurt worse than the actual thing they're going to do to you. That's been my experience. So, went to the dentist a few years ago because I cracked a couple teeth eating pistachios. Found out that they were, because of the fillings I had when I was young, silver fillings, they keep pushing down over a lifetime and they eventually crack a tooth open. It wasn't because I was eating something I shouldn't eat, it was just the fillings were compacting. So I had all these fillings in the back of my teeth here, still got some. And the doctor says, well, I'm going to pull this tooth, I'm going to give you a shot. I said, oh, cool, I've never had a shot before. I already told him I don't like to go to the dentist. So I'm going to give you a shot. He says, oh, good, I never had a shot before. He looks at me, what? You've had all these big fillings and you've never had a shot? I said, nope. He says, no wonder you don't like to go to the dentist. Just, you know why? My mother, because those shots probably cost 50 cents or $1 back there. My mother didn't want to pay that kind of money, so she said, just do it. Anyway, I know my mother. Just do it, he's fine. So, anyway, the shot's worse than getting the tooth pulled. Arm yourselves. You're going to suffer in life. And if you think being a Christian means that you won't suffer, you're wrong, because you have an enemy who wants to see you suffer. See, Christian suffering here, now I know that he's talking about suffering, but Christian suffering is not about them coming in here with guns and saying, all you're worshiping God, we're going to arrest you and take you away, or put a gun to your head and say, renounce Christ, or I'm going to shoot you. That's Christian suffering, but we don't suffer that way much, hardly at all in this country. There are other places they do. It could happen too. That's why I'm very careful who I vote for. One of the big issues for me in voting is, does this person believe in true religious freedom? Or are they going to tell me that I have to follow what the government says and who I can worship and what I can do? Do they really? That's a big issue for me. And we have a political party that doesn't really believe in that. They believe the government should control what you say and can say, this is an incorrect belief, this is politically correct, and I don't vote for them. But that's the main reason why. It could still happen here, but when Satan attacks you, and you're a Christian, he's attacking you to see if he can destroy your faith. He does it to people that aren't believers to keep them from believing. Sometimes it doesn't work, and suffering makes them into believers. He still keeps doing it. Now, why would I say that? What evidence in the Bible do we have that Satan causes you to suffer so you won't believe in God or you lose your faith? Is it always about religion? No. Whole book of Job, all the way the oldest book is probably in the Bible. What was Satan trying to do? Destroy Job's faith. How did he do it? By making Job suffer, physically suffer, emotionally suffer, losing his children, losing his wife's companionship, apparently. He made him suffer, hoping that he would, as his wife said, curse God and die. Now, Job, the book of Job, he's tested and he doesn't do that. But does that mean Satan gave up on that? No, he knows that works for a lot of people. The biggest reason, if you've got some, now there's reasons why people don't believe in God, and we'll talk about one of them in the sermon this morning. But there is a true reason that some people don't who are honest, and that is they've seen suffering and they don't believe that God would ever allow suffering. They're mistaken about that. Or they think God should stop suffering that happens. And so therefore they don't believe in God. Why? Because they see suffering. Or maybe they suffered. Lost a loved one, lost this. That's why I always ask atheists whenever I talk to one of them, what's your story? It's a good question for them. What's your story? What's your atheist story? And some of them are right away know what I'm talking about. Others try to deny they have a story, but they do. You can find it out. What's their story? Well, when I was young, my sister was dying. We called the Catholic priest over. He kept saying nice words while my sister still died. So therefore I don't believe in God because God didn't save my sister. This is a common story. That kind of thing. So Satan is using suffering to destroy people's faith. He says, arm yourself with the same mind Jesus had. He knew that he was going to suffer. that Satan would try to kill him, and he was armed against him, and you need to have that same shield. You know that God is not against you just because you suffer. God is not against you because, and it's easy to feel that way when things keep going wrong, wrong, wrong. You think, well, what am I doing wrong? Why does God do this to me? What's the question people ask when they suffer? What is the number one question people ask? Why me? Even if their sister is dying, what question are they asking? Why does my sister dying? They don't care if your sister's dying. They want to know why my sister's dying. You see what I'm saying? Does God care more for your sister than their sister? Well, they think so in their mind. He should save my sister. Why? Because she's my sister. Doesn't make any sense. You look like that doesn't make any sense to you. People don't get upset because grandmas died. They get upset because my grandma died. It's always about the... And I'm not saying that's bad. We feel it more because it's personal. And so this is people's problem. But God never promised you if you become a Christian, your grandma and your sister will never die, or that nothing bad will ever happen to you. You won't go broke. He doesn't promise you won't go broke. He doesn't promise you you're always going to have a place to live that you like. He doesn't promise you doesn't promise you're not going to get plaque psoriasis or whatever the latest disease is. He doesn't promise you that. No, sorry if you got plaque psoriasis. I'm just saying that's what they put on the TV. That's a bad thing. Who wants it? Anybody want that? Of course you don't. He didn't promise you that, though. I worry about that. Maybe I'm going to get a little... Where do I get what that is? Anyway. Now, he says, if you arm yourself with this mind, the reason you should arm yourself, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Now, he puts this as a state. What does that mean? He who has suffered in the flesh. Who's the he who has suffered? Well, that's a Christian. And Christ, of course. But a Christian. He suffered in the flesh. And it says he ceased from sin. Now, that sounds like it's an absolute statement. I don't think it is. I think it is meaning that he should have ceased from sin or can cease from sin. And here's what. What does that mean? Well, it means that suffering in the flesh can help you to defeat sin. It can help you to be a better person and stop sinning against God. Suffering can do that. We think that if God would just leave me alone and let me have a nice life, I'd stop sinning. That's what we think. What's human nature say when God leaves people alone, they have a nice life and nothing goes wrong? What do we know what happens to those people oftentimes? Do they sin more or less? Yeah, do they become less self-centered and more sacrificial? No, they become more self-centered, more concerned about comforts, more worldly. But those who suffer are the ones who oftentimes, not every single one, oftentimes become more righteous or holy. This is why we see in a decadent society like ours, where all of us live in luxury, almost all of us live in luxury compared to any past point in history, I don't care where you go, we live in absolute luxury. You all got up this morning and you went through your routine in a nice warm bed with beautiful sheets and it probably got bamboo wicking and you got grounding, you got all this stuff. You got my bed, I can take my phone and change it while I'm laying there and it gets softer, harder, raise it up. Oh, it's just wonderful, you know. That's my bed. I don't know about your lousy bed. Nobody's sleeping on the floor or on straw. You're sleeping on something like that. Get up, it's temperature controlled. You turn on the tap and guess what comes out? Hot water comes out. I can adjust it to perfect temperature that I like. Then we have all these whole thing. I keep getting hit in the foot because all these bottles of stuff fall off on me when I'm trying to get to my soap in the shower. We have, as I say all the time, you women have more stuff than Cleopatra ever had to put on your body. She never had so much luxury. You got it here, and you're just an ordinary American. And then we eat breakfast. I got a whole stack of different cereal boxes and other things I can eat for breakfast. And I got getting a nice car, air-conditioned, controlled ride, and blah, blah, blah. Come here, air-conditioned building, everything's fine. I was thinking this morning, something made me think about the fact that maybe something I put on the line, I saw no power. And I thought, I wonder if I get to the building tomorrow, there's going to be electricity there. Do you ever think about that? That when you come here to worship, there's not going to be any electricity? Suppose we found out at 8:30 on Sunday morning, Port St. Lucie was completely out of power. The first thought that some of us would have is, we better cancel services. We don't have any electricity. Am I wrong about that? Is that the first thing people would think? We need to cancel services. No electricity. How many centuries did people not have electricity and they still came to church? But we were like, we don't have any lights, we don't have any air conditioning. No, the water fountain won't work, which is true if it's not plugged in. What are we going to do? And then we sing the song, living below in this old sinful world, hardly a comfort can afford. Really? That was written during the Depression. I could see that, but that's not what's going on today. Anyway, the point being, does all of that lead us to be more dedicated to Christ or less? It's a good chance it leads us to being weak. Because the first obstacle that comes in our way, like the power going out, we're ready to give it up. So there's a reason God allows suffering. Now, I'm not suffering for suffering's sake particularly, and I'm fine with all the accoutrements that we have. Don't jump to the wrong conclusion, but he's saying here, there's a point to be made that he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Suffering can help you to overcome sin. And on many levels. Physical suffering. Because it makes you know who you are better. The little bit of suffering I've had in my life has helped me to have courage sometimes. Have courage that when the next thing comes along, it's going to be okay. My mother taught me this. I've told you this story before. And one day I really remember this. I was like in 6th or 7th grade. Had all these trouble with my feet, my legs because of cerebral palsy, all this stuff. And then I had to wear orthopedic shoes and all this, couldn't wear regular clothes. And go to the doctor, things kept getting worse. And doctor says that day, Mike's got to have braces. He needs braces. Well, when you're that age, you don't want to hear that you got to wear braces like those other crippled kids do that are made fun of and can't do anything. You don't want to hear that. So he got in the car. He described what the braces are going to be like. I'm sitting there. My mother's in the car. I guess tears running down my face. I don't know. I was not happy. I'm going to be wearing braces. She says, it's okay, because she says, I don't know why God makes you suffer, but someday you'll be a better man for it. There's a reason why. You'll be a better person because of this. I said, yeah, but I don't want to be a better person. That's exactly what I thought. I don't want to be a better person if I got to wear braces to be a better person. Okay. So, now, the jury's still out on that. But what she says is, I think, now this is something else she said, which I went, I understand that, but she says, God is preparing you for some other great suffering you're going to have to endure that this will prepare you for. Other great suffering, that's what I'm thinking. Well, I don't even want this. Why do I want something worse? Was she right? Well, yes, she was. Because everything that you endure, when you come on the other side and you don't buckle under and give in, you're stronger. And the next thing that you have to suffer is easier. At least it's understandable. And you know that I can do this. I can make this. I can be okay. Which is a tremendous gift that God gives you that sometimes other people don't have. Every little thing throws them off kilter. This is a problem with addicts oftentimes, is that they don't endure the suffering. They suffer, something happens, and they relieve the suffering with drugs, and so they don't endure the suffering. And then when something else happens, they have to have more drugs because they haven't not endured that suffering. It becomes a vicious cycle that makes them weaker, not stronger. So this is what he's saying. Now, he's not saying it's an automatic process, because I don't believe that it is an automatic process, that just because you suffer that you cease from sin. Some people suffer, I just mentioned that. They suffer and they go on sinning more. But he says, I want you, he says in verse 2, that you should no longer live the rest of your time in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. You have to make up your mind, this arming that you take, the arming that you put on, the weaponry, the shield that Bob's talking about, the armor you talk about, is so that you can understand, I'm not going to keep living the way I did before I became a Christian. I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to live the rest of my time to the will of God. And suffering can help you do that. It can make you realize that, because you realize what you're giving up. And I think that's especially true sometimes of religious suffering. It makes you stronger in these things. Satan, well, this is what they said in the 1st century, 2nd century. One of the quotes, and I forgot who said it now, one of these early Christians. The Romans were killing people. And he said, the blood that drops to the ground is our seed. And from that blood sprout more Christians. Satan wanted to kill them. He killed James and the apostle and Christians and Stephen. After Stephen was killed in Acts 8, it says that Christians fled and they went everywhere preaching the word. And so the church spread. Satan wanted to wipe it out and destroy it, but it just spread the word because they became more dedicated. So we don't think of suffering the same way that God does. And I'm telling you, the one thing I want you to get, I'm telling you that all the suffering you endure, from health, grief, people not thinking well of you, all the suffering you endure can be an impetus for you to live a righteous life and a good life. It can focus your mind on what's really important. I was talking to some kids the other day. I was at a 4-H show. I judged a 4-H show over in the metropolis of Immokalee. Anyway, and somehow this came up. Pretty privilege. You all know what pretty privilege is? The 4-H leader and these girls never heard of pretty privilege. I said, you know why you never heard of pretty privilege? Because you got it. Pretty privilege is the fact that good-looking people have an easier time in life than ugly people do. They looked at me. I said, oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. Ask me how I know. That's what I said, and they laughed. You don't know which side that I'm on, but it's true. If you're a blonde, blue-eyed girl, you have an easier time in life than some girl with dark hair and who's got, like Leah, weak eyes in the Bible. Leah was ugly compared to her sister Rachel. That's what the Bible's saying very plainly there. Leah was not attractive. Her sister Rachel was. Which one had an easier time? Well, I think Rachel had an easier time. Jacob loved her. She was pretty. Didn't like Leah. Which one was the better woman, though, in the Bible? Which one got to be the ancestor of Jesus Christ? Not Rachel, the pretty one, but Leah, the ugly one. And you'll find this true. Never make a pretty woman your wife. Isn't that the song? Now, Judy, she just walked out, so doesn't always work. No, but my wife had suffered as a young girl. She didn't have it easy, even though she's blonde and blue-eyed. And that made her a better person. Completely a better person than others around her because she suffered. And so people who are pretty get treated well. Men who are muscular, strong, big, they get the quarterback treatment. The star quarter. Do star quarterbacks have good character? Maybe. Maybe not. Okay. And it goes both ways. Ugly people, nerds can become bitter and angry. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm just telling you, get a different perspective on these things. And determine that you're going to, that the second bell, Joel?
Yes.
Okay, that you're going to live the rest of your life, not to the lusts of men, what people want you to do, not go that direct, but go live for the will of God. And suffering can be the impetus to cause you to clean things up. Now, we're going to talk next week. He said, we spent enough of our past lifetime doing the will of the Gentiles. And listen, when we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. So for those of you who hate my words and word lists, you might not even want to come next week. Because we're going to talk about these words and what they mean. You can't understand this verse unless you know what these words mean. I know we wish we could just not do the words, but we're going to do the words. I know some of you don't feel that way, but we're going to talk about what those are and why he brings those things up to these people here in this case. All right. And they think it's strange you don't keep doing this, but you're not going to as a Christian. Peter's getting into now the real nitty-gritty of what he wants to tell these people. Well, he has been already, but he's really getting down to it. All right, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments. Sorry for my stupid stories.